So I was watching the show 13 Reasons Why, and honestly, I'll tell you this much. This is gonna get really dark, but if I ever took my life, I think this would be one of my 13 reasons. And honestly, today's story does get really intense and really just embarrassing, so make sure you guys do leave a like and subscribe to the channel if you haven't already, because seriously, it means a lot when you guys do. But what is going on, you guys? My name is Bubba, and welcome back to another insane story. So today's story takes place back when I was in middle school. It's my grade 7 year, and I remember I was just chilling, doing my own thing one time, walking down the hallway. And I remember when I was walking down the hallway, I was talking to a lot of my friends that were there. Well, friends in quotations, I'm gonna put it in, because honestly, a lot of these friends of mine aren't actually my friends anymore. But at the same time, it was middle school, so who really out there is still friends with their middle school friends? If you are still friends with your middle school friends, make sure you guys comment down below. But basically, I remember what I was doing was I was walking down the hallway with some friends, and basically what ended up happening was I ended up seeing my middle school crush in the hallway and got really shy. Now, I've talked a lot about my middle school crush on this channel, and one thing I gotta say is that no matter what, to this day, she's the most beautifulest girl I've ever seen. Other than my girlfriend. She's probably watching the video right now, so I love you, babe. Anyways, going on with the story though, I remember basically when I saw her in the hallway, I looked at her and kind of panicked. So I remember I ended up hiding behind my friend group and basically kept walking down the hallway. In any way, there was no way I was going to embarrass myself at all in front of this girl. There was no way I was gonna let her see my goofy, loser, uncool side that I had back in middle school. Now, one thing I will say is that I was really insecure in middle school, and don't get me wrong, I feel like a lot of middle schoolers feel this way. But one thing I will say is that if anything came up to me, my middle school crush, I always wanted her to think I was cool. Like, for example, I'd post photos of me going to car dealerships, sitting in the cars that were inside, and basically acting like it was my own car, and post it on Instagram back in the good old days. Very embarrassing, but I mean, let's be real, a lot of us have done that already. And I remember basically one time when I was going to my locker, my middle school crush ended up actually coming up to me. She came up to me and said, "Hey, I'm just curious. There's a new girl in our school, and like, I think she's like actually like kind of into you. I was just wondering, like, have you spoke to her?" Now, I found it really weird how my middle school crush decided to tell me about this new girl in school, and honestly, I totally just ignored her and said, "Oh, like, nah, like, I don't talk to her," acting like I'm playing the cool guy that doesn't actually want her, even though I'm basically begging to have her. And then she ended up telling me, "Okay, whatever," and she ended up walking away. I remember at that point, I remember one of my homies came up behind me and said, "Yo, bro, you ended up talking to her. What'd she say?" "She brought up another girl that likes me," is what I told him. And I remember my friend looked at me all weird saying, "All right, whatever." Anyways, going on, I remember I ended up going to my class that day that I had with my middle school crush and this new girl that ended up coming to our school. I remember she ended up entering the classroom when all the students were sat down, and the teacher walked up in front of the class and said, "Okay, class, so this is our new student. She is here from Romania, so everyone show love and respect, and yeah, take a seat." This girl instantly gets up, walks over to the seat that was empty, that was right beside me, because I was sitting in the back of the classroom, and she sat down beside me and looked at me and stared me down and said, "So I was wondering, like, what's your name?" Hi, my name is Bubba," is what I said, and I ended up shaking her hand. I remember when I shook her hand though, my middle school crush looked at me and kind of stared at me kind of odd. Now, I had no idea why this happened, and honestly, like, it was super awkward. So I remember when I saw her looking at me, I basically refused to talk to the new girl in our class because I didn't want her to think that I had any intentions with her. Kind of a smart move, but at the same time kind of dumb. Anyways, later on throughout the class, I remember our teacher ended up handing out an assignment. It was an assignment that we had to do with partners, and basically we had to make a PowerPoint presentation on mythical creatures that, you know, were back then, like, you know, known as myths and stuff. So basically, I remember I ended up choosing my partner, which was one of my homies, but he already ended up finding a partner, so I ended up getting stuck looking around the classroom for a partner. Luckily for me, there was the new girl in our class that ended up walking up to me saying, "Oh, like, do you want to be my partner?" I guess," is what I said. And I remember I ended up becoming partners with this girl. So I remember when me and her were like working on the project and stuff, we ended up having to take it home because, well, I'm gonna be real with you guys, the project was a really big project. So I remember I ended up going home to my place and ended up inviting her over to my house to basically work on the project. And I remember as she came over, she was really excited to come over and stuff, and she was super weird. I remember when my mom opened the door for her, my mom ended up saying, "Oh, she's cute." And then basically the girl literally said, "Oh, like, yeah, like, I hope your son thinks so." Because I remember when I looked at her and said, "Why would you say that?" I ended up seeing the new girl that came to our class was literally wearing like a really cute dress. I found it super awkward and was hoping that this girl didn't think this was like a date or something. I don't know. I don't want her getting the wrong mindset. But basically, she ended up coming into my house and we ended up working in the living room doing our school project. And I remember as we were doing our school project, she kept asking me questions about the school. Like, for example, who's the worst teachers, you know, like who to stay away from, who to be on whose good side, how to get to the cafeteria lineup before anyone else gets there to get the cool ice cream. Okay, that was mostly something I knew, but you know, whatever. And basically, one thing led to another. She ended up popping a question that I did not expect her to ask. She ended up asking me, "Oh, like, just a question, do you have a crush on this girl?" girl. She ended up literally having a photo on her iPod and was legit a photo of basically my middle school crush. I remember I looked at the photo and said, I mean, yeah, like I liked her for a couple of years now. She was pretty cool. And me saying that, I remember she ended up moving her iPod away and looking at me, staring me deep in the eyes and said, why? Why do you like her? Like, what's so good about her? I remember I looked at her and said, I don't know, like she's cute and I've had a crush on her for like the last 2 years. I remember this girl ended up saying, oh, like, then why didn't you like make your move? Because I couldn't is what I told her. And then I kept just working on the project. I remember this girl ended up getting really irritated that I said that and ended up slamming her hands on the table saying, why don't you like me instead? Like, I don't understand. Like, don't you think I'm cute as well? I ended up looking at her super awkwardly and saying, yeah, listen, like, I think you're cool and all, but like, I just don't like you like that. I only like my middle school crush. And also, we just met. I remember when I said that, she looked at me deep in the eyes and said, well, like, that doesn't mean anything. Yeah, it does, is what I told her afterwards. And for some reason, she wasn't taking no for an answer. To the point where I remember she got so mad, she ended up standing up and actually leaving my house without saying a word. I remember my mom actually walked into the conversation and just saw her leave. And my mom just looked at me saying, you know, she's maybe cute, but she's pretty psychotic, it seems. And ended up actually going back to the kitchen, making me a sandwich. Now, I thought this was just the end of the conversation and that's it. You know, like simple as that. Girl realizes I don't like her and I only like one woman, my middle school crush. But sadly, that wasn't the case. Things ended up going for the worse. I remember the next day when I ended up going to the classroom, we were basically getting ready to tell our presentations. And I remember basically for some reason, my partner was there, the new girl, but she kept looking at me in like a most devious way, as if she was going to do something really bad to me or my middle school crush. So I remember I ended up deciding to be the superhero here and basically tell my middle school crush before class started, hey, like, listen, I don't know what this girl's going to do, bro, but I'm just going to say, like, just stay away from her. I remember my middle school crush ended up looking at me saying, okay, I guess. And it ended up going back to her seat. And me, I ended up going back to my seat. And then my partner, aka the new girl in class, ended up walking into the room and sat down. At this point, everyone was doing the class presentations, talking about mythical creatures and stuff. And then one thing led to another. It was my turn. I ended up going up with the PowerPoint I ended up making because, you know, she ended up leaving halfway through while we were working on the project and basically started presenting it. And as I was presenting it, I remember this was the most worst moment ever. We were getting towards the end of the presentation and out of nowhere, this girl decides to come up behind me and pants me in front of my entire class. That is right. She literally showed my eggplant in front of my entire class because that day, for some reason, I decided to go commando to school. Listen, like I said earlier, I didn't make smart decisions in school and this was definitely one of them. But at the end of the day, I mean, hey, I guess my crush ended up seeing how big I was. How my crush saw my eggplant at school. So this story does get really insane, but before I do, make sure you guys leave a like and subscribe if you guys haven't already. Seriously, it means a lot when you guys do. And let's just get straight into this story. Yo, what is going on, you guys? My name is Bubba and welcome back to another insane story. So this story, funny enough, takes place back when I was in middle school. You see, back when I was in middle school, I'm not gonna lie, I wasn't the most greatest looking kid. Like, I know I had a really weird pubic stash, and honestly, I was just a brown boy growing up. I think that's like the best way to explain it, really. But anyways, I remember one day, this specific day was a special day, because the day before, I remember my teacher told us all in class, tomorrow will be sports day, so make sure you guys wear your team's jerseys. And it was basically sports day. Now, if you guys know what sports day is basically where a bunch of kids basically go to school, have fun, play games, and do sports or stuff relating to sports. For example, like track and field, kicking a soccer ball, so many different things. If you guys do have sports day, comment down below what was your favorite thing about sports day. For me, it was probably skipping class and not actually doing any homework because homework sucks. Anyways, going on with the story, sports day came around and it was finally the day. I remember I woke up and I was actually like really lazy this day. I think it was because I was playing Black Ops 2 Zombies for like, I don't know, all night basically, and I slept at like 5 a.m. and I woke up at like 7:30 just to get ready for school. Yeah, my mom was not happy about that, but I remember waking up and I was super exhausted. Like, I was tired of the tired. You guys have no idea how exhausted I was, but I still got up for school because it was sports day. I'm not gonna miss out on a day where I could literally just do nothing in school. So I remember I got up and I was walking to my closet and I remember I was going through my clothing. I got my t-shirt, my pants that I needed, my socks. I always wear socks. Feet are weird. And I remember I looked for the one final thing and that was my underwear. Now, I remember when I was looking for it, I couldn't find any clean underwear. Before anyone says anything, no, I'm not gonna wear dirty underwear. Ew. Seriously, who do you think I am? One of those e-girls on Twitch that sells them? Oh, by the way, I'm live on Twitch as we speak, by the way. I forgot to mention that. Anyways, when I realized I had no clean underwear, I remember I was panicking. But then I remember that, honestly, there was one thing I could do. And guys, don't ever do this, but I ended up going commando. Now, if you guys don't know what commando is, basically going commando is a certain thing that most kids shouldn't be doing in middle school, and a lot of kids shouldn't be doing in general. The only time you do this if you're home alone or you just have nothing better to do. Hell, I'm usually naked when I'm home alone, but going on. The basic way to say what is going commando bro, is basically not wearing underwear. Going out and not wearing underwear at all. That is the definition of going commando. And I ended up doing it. I remember I put on my gym shorts, and I'm not gonna lie, my gym shorts were like one of those gym shorts where it's like really easy to not see through, but you know, like it's obvious of making shapes, and it was pretty hard to hide my enormous eggplant. So yeah, that wasn't fun. But honestly, I ended up going to school anyway. Me being the lazy person I was, I just ended up getting up, going to school, and when I got there, I remember all of us were just kind of hanging out in classrooms, getting ready for sports day. I remember sitting down and seeing my crush, and I remember looking at her while she was looking at me. It was kind of awkward interaction. Thank God she didn't look down at my massive eggplant, because that would have been a bad idea. But honestly, the story does get worse, so let me explain. I remember getting up partway through sports day, and we all ended up going outside to the field. We were all basically like doing these basic things like running and all this stuff and doing all these things. But honestly, me, I didn't participate in many sports because one, I was tired as hell, and two, I'm not gonna run when I don't have any tighty whities on, bro, because if I do, then everyone in my school is gonna see something massive just going side to side. And yes, I am talking about my eggplant, okay guys? Don't be weird. So most of sports day, I remember I ended up just sitting down at the bleachers with my friends, or friends as we would call it. They're mostly just people that help me with my homework. I ended up just sitting down and just talking to all of them about sports day, how fun it was and all this stuff. And me sitting down, not many people would look between my legs, which is a good thing. And then I remember the one thing that I hated most, my middle school bully. God, man, I seriously hate this guy. There's so many problems with this dude that you guys have no idea. Anyways, he was a lacrosse player, and honestly, he was like one of those kids that thought he was super cool. You know, he acted like the cool kid in school. And even though he had blonde eyes, blue hair, and he was like the perfect guy, I guess, in most girls' eyes back in middle school, I honestly hated him. My whole entire gut hated him. And there's so many stories of why. So if you guys do want another story with him in it, trust me, I got many of them. Anyways, one of the main reasons though why I really hated my middle school bully was because he had the same crush as me. We both liked the same girl since the beginning of middle school till the end, and it sucked. I remember me and him would always have random competitions throughout like the school year, but knowing that it was sports day, I guess being competitive went up another step. I remember what ended up happening was a lot of the students ended up going to line up for the long jump. If you guys don't know what long jump is, basically it's this thing where you basically run as much as you can and jump into a pit of sand, and you mark the sand and you're like, oh, you jumped this far, whoop-de-doo, and it's kind of just dumb. And I remember my middle school crush ended up lining up for the long jump. Now me sitting there on the bleachers, I remember looking at my friend and telling him, yo, do you think I can do long jump? And then he looked at me saying, dude, you're literally 5'2". There's no way you can do long jump. And at that moment I said, screw it. I remember getting up and walking over to my middle school crush, and I ended up lining up right behind her. And as I was lining up right behind her, I was just kind of chatting her up, you know, having a little cool conversation, being cool, you know, all that cool stuff, or at least pretending to be cool. I'm gonna be honest. And I'm not gonna lie, I was kind of covering my like wee-wee or eggplant with my arms somewhat, just so she wouldn't look down further enough. And me and her had a good conversation. I'm not gonna lie, guys. We literally talked about Harry Potter, Percy Jackson, and Lightning Thief. She was a book reader, apparently. I don't know. She was hot, so I didn't really care. And, you know, we were just having a basic conversation. But of course, as usual, the worst of the worst ended up happening. I remember as we were just having a normal conversation with eye-to-eye contact, my middle school bully came up to me. He came up behind me and tapped me on the shoulder saying, hey, what's going on, doofus? And he ended up turning my body. I ended up telling him to leave me alone. And honestly, my middle school crush was kind of like weirded out by like what was going on. So she kind of just turned away and went back to talking to her friends. And I kept looking at him saying, dude, just leave me alone. Like, I'm just trying to have a conversation, bro. And he's like, oh, what are you gonna do? You're gonna shoot me, little boy? Yeah, I don't know. He would make up really dumb jokes about like me having a bomb and stuff because I was brown. Not funny, by the way. Racism's not cool. And then I remember I ended up just looking at him saying, leave me alone. You're so dumb. And at that moment, I turned around and I started talking to my middle school crush again. But boy, do I regret it. I remember when I turned around and started talking to my middle school crush again, and me and her had eye-to-eye contact again, he ended up doing the unthinkable. He said, yo, Bubba, check this out. And as I was just trying to ignore him, Ben decided to grab my pants and pull them down. He literally pantsed me when I was going commando at school in front of my middle school crush, not to mention. Yeah, that was not fun. I was pissed. I'm not gonna lie, guys. I had so much anger going through me that when I had eye-to-eye contact with my middle school crush, I remember I just see her eyes go from my eyes down to my eggplant. She saw my massive eggplant. And honestly, guys, I was so embarrassed. Like, you guys have no idea how embarrassed I was. I think from a scale of 1 to embarrassed, I was super embarrassed. And I remember being so awkward to the point where I was like, and my hands were kind of like in the air, kind of freaking out as my like giant eggplant is just swinging side to side and freaking panicking. And then I remember my middle school crush just looks at my eyes again. She's like, why aren't you wearing underwear? And I'm like, oh, and I literally pulled my pants back up and I ran away. But I didn't just run anywhere. I ran home. I literally ran 4 blocks just to go home and cannot look back. I never sprinted so fast in my life. Like, I didn't run that fast during the track meet when it was sports day. Like, I sprinted, bro. I remember my teachers were pissed off, like really mad at me because I ended up running away. And the next day at school, when I went back there, I remember my middle school crush was kind of ignoring me because I don't blame her. She literally did see my giant eggplant, which sucks. But overall, yeah, it was just mortal embarrassment. And honestly, to this day, I absolutely just hate it. And also, screw you, my middle school bully. You know who you are. I know you watch my videos, punk. I remember the school got into a lockdown. Then out of nowhere, I ended up heading straight for the doors. But then I realized that the doors were locked. And my crush looks at me saying, oh my goodness, I think we're trapped in here. Like, what was I supposed to do? Yo, what is going on, you guys? My name is Bubba, and welcome back to another crazy story. So this story all happened back when I was actually in middle school. And in middle school, I'm not gonna lie to you, I was in no way a player. Okay, usually I would say I was a player, but that was only in high school. In middle school, I was a really insecure kid, and I'm not gonna lie to you, the only things I actually cared about back then was playing video games and kind of just Batman. Batman's been my favorite superhero ever since I was a kid, by the way, and still to this day, I love Batman, to the point where I even have a Batman tattoo. But going on with the story, I remember there was a day in middle school where basically the teacher ended up walking in front of the classroom saying, okay, class, so we're going to be having a surprise lockdown eventually sometime this week. So I want you guys all to make sure you guys are calm and ready for when it happens. It's just a drill, and trust me, everything will be a-okay. I promise. Now, obviously, if you guys don't know what a lockdown is, basically is when your school gets like kind of like into a lockdown for like safety reasons, and everyone has to like kind of go into the corner of the classroom and hide. It's like rehearsed for certain reasons, which I mean, if you're an American citizen, you would understand. But going on with the story, I remember all my friends were talking about this, saying that it was like a super fun thing to like basically rehearse, which honestly kind of blew my mind and really did not make any sense. Because me personally, I never liked doing any drill, like fire drill, lockdowns. Like I never liked any of it back when I was growing up, because let's be real here, the alarm is super loud when it happens. But throughout the entire week, I remember a lot of students the whole time in the school would keep trying to like predict when the lockdown was gonna happen. I don't know why, but there were even people like trying to make jokes about it and stuff, which honestly is not something to joke about in my opinion. But I had bigger worries to worry about, because I remember the next day ended up coming around, and basically I ended up going into my science classroom. Now growing up, I was never good at science, but I remember our science teacher ended up handing us a project that we had to do grouped up in pairs, and me, I ended up pairing up with my crush. Now if you guys don't know, back when I was in middle school, I had a major crush on this one certain girl. Like this girl was my entire world. I even wrote about her in my journal as if like it was a diary. That's how far I've gotten with falling in love with this girl. But at the time of this story, I'm not gonna lie to you, I never actually even spoke to this girl. Like I don't even know if she knows I existed. But I remember out of pure embarrassment, I remember the teacher ends up calling out my name and my crush's name right afterwards, and we were assigned as a group for a science project. Now this moment, I remember was the first time my crush ever like actually stared into my eyes, and she looked at me saying, okay, well, I guess you're my partner. You're Bubba, right? Yeah, hi. I'm Bubba. Okay, cool. Now I'm not gonna lie, she looked at me as if I was pretty dumb, but don't get me wrong, I was really nervous. And back when I was in middle school, I had a majorly bad stutter. Okay, like the stutter was bad. Even during like recording these videos, I'm not gonna lie to you, I stutter a lot, but thank God there's a thing called editing, because if there wasn't, then I would be stuttering 24/7. And I don't think you guys want to hear that. But basically me and her, we ended up pairing up together, and we ended up going to a different part of the classroom, and me and her, we started working on this project where we were supposed to make things light up with a potato. Yeah, I didn't know there was energy in potatoes or in certain foods, I guess, but that was like basically like the unit we were on for like finding out electricity. So we ended up using a potato to try to make power. But I remember the whole time this girl, my crush, would speak to me, I would always, and I mean always, stutter trying to say something back to her. Like it was a repeat of, oh, like, did you actually plug that in properly? Yeah, like it was really bad, and it was very obvious that like that she felt uncomfortable because, well, I guess I was a weirdo back then. I'm not gonna lie. I remember when the bell rang for lunch, instantly I ended up seeing this girl getting up and actually leaving the classroom right away. Like she didn't even say anything to me and left, and I noticed that she went straight to her friends, and I guess they started gossiping about me because she ended up pointing at me and I guess making fun of me, which honestly I don't blame her, but to this day, like, you know, it does kind of suck being, you know, hated on like that. But to be fair, I deal with hate all the time now. I don't know, it was just something personal that actually kind of hurt my feelings. And when my feelings were hurt back then, well, the first thing I would do is go straight to my journal, not a diary, it was a journal, and I would write in it basically putting down my feelings. But as I went to my locker, I ended up realizing that my journal wasn't there. I ended up freaking out, and I'm like, wait, where's my journal? What? And I started panicking and freaking out because that journal leaving my vicinity was a bad thing, a very bad thing. You guys don't understand what's in my journal. Well, actually, I made a video about it a long time back. If you guys do want to see that, check it out on the channel. But going on, I started panicking and thinking, where would I leave my journal? I went back into like every classroom I could think of, and then the bell finally rang for lunch to end, and I was back into my science classroom because that was the last place I did not check. As I'm in my science classroom, I'm looking around trying to find this thing, and one thing led to another. I ended up seeing my crush end up walking in to the science classroom saying, "Oh, hey, Bubba, I forgot my textbook here. Do you know where it is?" And right at that moment, when she asked me that, I ended up hearing a brr, 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 and it was the alarm going off for the lockdown. I remember I start panicking, and I look at her thinking, wait, what's going on? And instantly, at that moment, I realized that the doors ended up making like a locking sound, and I sprinted for the doors before it could happen, but I didn't make it in time, obviously. And right as I'm like moving the door handle, I'm realizing that it's not unlocking. My crush ends up looking over my shoulder, and she says, Bubba, I think we're stuck in here. And at that moment, I end up looking at her, and I'm like, what? We're stuck? We're gonna die, dude. Bubba, there's nothing to worry about, okay? Like, it's just a lockdown. It's just a drill. Relax. Okay, well, like, what's the procedure? What are we supposed to do? I ended up trying to figure out, like, what was the best plan and trying to find any worksheet around the teacher's desk that told us what we were supposed to do in a lockdown, because I was panicking so much to the point where I did not know what to do. I remember this girl, though, that was in the classroom with me. She did not care at all. Like, my crush did not care whatsoever that there was a lockdown happening. She literally ended up sitting at the teacher's desk and decided to basically, like, sit back and just go on her phone. I ended up looking at her saying, you do realize we're in lockdown, right? Like, we can't just be on our phones. Like, what if we get in trouble? Bubba, there's no one in here but us. We're gonna be fine. Okay, you can say that all you want, but we're in a lockdown. We should at least treat it like a lockdown. Oh my goodness, why do you gotta be so weird, Bubba? At this moment, I remember I looked at her and I'm like, wait, you actually think I'm that weird? Well, no, I didn't mean it like that. And at that moment, I'm not gonna lie to you, I ended up just sitting down and just saying, okay, you know what? Whatever. Just do what you want, I guess. I remember my crush ends up walking up beside me and sitting down and saying, you know, this is the first time I've heard you not stutter towards me. Yeah, well, I get nervous around you. I don't know. What? Why do you get nervous, Bubba? Well, I don't know if you know, but like, I have a crush on you. So like, obviously, like, I'm gonna be nervous around you. It kind of makes sense, doesn't it? Oh, I just thought you were like dumb or something. At that moment, I ended up looking at her, and me and her, we started laughing. And well, one thing led to another. We actually started connecting on a different level. We started talking about popularity and like, you know, how middle school is like basically the age where we all hit puberty and start being weirdos, I guess. And me and her, we actually got along to the point where she actually ended up letting me put my arm around her. And well, one thing led to another. I started to notice that she was leaning in towards me. So I decided to lean back towards her. And me thinking this was the first time I was ever gonna get to kiss a girl that was my crush, the teacher ends up unlocking the science classroom and looking at us saying, hey, what are you two doing in here? It's a lockdown. You guys are supposed to be outside. The teachers are looking for you. Oh, sorry, we're heading right out right now. At that moment, I remember she ended up standing up right away and leaving, and me, I'm just sitting at that desk thinking, wow, the best thing that was ever gonna happen to me ended up getting blocked by a teacher. I remember I ended up basically going outside with this girl, and we ended up lining up in our classrooms like we were supposed to, and well, the teacher got obviously really mad at us to the point where actually I ended up getting detention. And not only me, but she also got detention as well. And I remember this girl, when she found out she got detention, she ended up gossiping with her friends saying that I was at fault for it, and she called me the weirdo that got her detention, even after everything that just happened. Honestly, my heart broke. I'm not gonna lie to you. And I thought, you know what? Maybe there was no chance with me ever being with this girl ever. Maybe she was just too out of my league. Until after school came around, I remember I ended up basically going to detention like I was supposed to. And I saw her at the front of the door, and she looked at me and she went inside her backpack and said, hey, Bubba, wait, I have something for you. I remember I found this in the classroom. And she ended up handing me my journal. I ended up grabbing it right away saying, wait, you didn't read this, did you? No, I didn't read it, Bubba. I respect your privacy, okay? And to be honest, you're embarrassing for yourself enough. Oh, okay, cool, is what I said. And we ended up going into detention and dealing with it. Honestly, I don't know. It was kind of a crazy experience, and to this day, it kind of sucked knowing what happened. And if my middle school crush is watching this right now, I just want to say you suck. Like, seriously, like, you were just a D1 hater. Like, for real. Why'd you gotta hurt me like that back when I was a kid? I don't know. Parts of me think that she's the reason why I became an ultimate player. But other than that, follow for more embarrassing stories just like this one. Peace out, guys.